Welcome back to another video I have for you guys here today on Madden 19. Today I'm going to be giving you guys some tips for rebuilding better. A couple people have suggested that I do this. Like, I get asked pretty frequently what my experience sliders are and what my settings are, all that good stuff. And a couple people have also just asked me to do an entire video on rebuild tips, so that's what today's video is going to be all about. Also, I'm using the Eagles just because they're my favorite team. There's no real reason behind it. I don't really need any specific team for this. But let's get started with my settings. These are pretty universal. I'm pretty sure like quite standard among people who do rebuilds. So kind of what you just want to have coach firing off. I mean, you don't have to turn that off if you don't want to, but I like it that way because a few teams it's better to, like, if you're rebuilding a few particular teams, it's better just to tank the first season and just acquire as many draft picks as you can. And then this allows you to not get fired afterwards, because there's a chance you could get fired if your team goes like 2-14 the first season. But like I mentioned, sometimes that's actually ideal. That's kind of what you want to do. So that's why I have coach firing off. You can make it CPU only, but I just turn it off entirely. Salary cap on, that's what I roll with. You can turn it off if you want, but I think it's more fun to rebuild with salary cap on. Injury and pre-existing injury pretty much have to be off if you want to have a fantasy style rebuild, or even a realistic rebuild, you turn them off too. But if you want to get like regular like numbers at the end of the season, if you want to get numbers that other rebuilders get for like stats and stuff, you want to have injury and pre-existing injury off. At least pre-existing injury. I guess you could probably roll with injury off, but then that could be pretty random. Your star player could get hurt and your team could just not play well. I like having them both off. Also, I'm not sure if this is actually true, but I remember hearing that quarter length actually impacts the stats. So I always just put it up to 15 just to get the maximum stats that I could. I guess you can go 1 minute quarters. I actually didn't even know you could go that low, to be honest. I thought the lowest was like 5. But yeah, 15-minute quarters, that's kind of what I roll with for that. And then another little thing, tutorial pop-ups, I turn that off because if you have it on, you waste a couple scouting points. At least you did in the past Maddens. I haven't had it on in forever, but it used to be where, like, right when you're able to scout, it'll just automatically scout the first player just to teach you how to scout. I just turn it off so I save some points. You could also have scout college players on auto, and this will just mean the computer will scout as many players as they can. They usually only get into like the 4th round. They don't scout too far down the draft board. I like to do it manually, at least for the first 2 seasons. I typically do it manually, and then I will turn it off. The next thing I want to showcase is my experience slider. So everything is on 160%, pretty typical. Usually people hover around like 150, sometimes going above 160, sometimes remaining below 150, but it's usually around this area. You kind of can't go wrong if you're around the 150 range. I just prefer 160. I used to have fullbacks, kickers, and punters all to 300, but that didn't go well because in my one rebuild, the last time I did that, I think they all had almost 100 experience points, which was not what I was going for. I was just trying to make it so kickers and punters and stuff actually get decent experience points. I guess this is like the best way to ensure that, because if they're on 100%, they barely get any. 160, they get a decent number of them. The next thing I guess I'll go over, this is actually, I think this is more important than actually having good players. It's the schemes you choose to run. So from my experience, West Coast schemes don't work for me. I don't know if it's just a user control thing or if I just had bad experiences with it, but West Coast style offenses do not perform well in simulation. Vertical and multiple zone, like I don't really run multiple zone or multiple power all too much, but like the vertical zone run and the vertical power run, they have relative success with me. It's kind of hit or miss with those. Spread is the most reliable one for me. It makes the quarterbacks play out of their minds. They typically have over 4,000 yards, and if you have a good running back, they will typically run over like 1,000 yards pretty consistently. So I would advise running spread. And then defensively, honestly, it just depends on your personnel. Honestly, like base 4-3, multiple 4-3, depends who you have on your defense. If you want to run a 4-3, if you want to run a 3-4, base 3-4, multiple 3-4, perfectly fine. I don't really mess with Tampa 2 or 4-6 or 46, I guess. I don't really mess with those all that much. I've heard that 46 defense isn't very good, just in comments and stuff. I don't really have too much of a preference. I usually just run base 4-3 if I'm running a 4-3, and then base 3-4 if I'm running a 3-4. For my offensive playbook, I change this every once in a while, but I'll typically go with, I think I went the wrong direction. I'll typically go with New England's playbook because I feel like New England plus spread is just a deadly combo. You know, the Saints have a good playbook as well. You can go with the Saints. The Steelers, the Cowboys all have pretty good playbooks in Madden, at least for sim purposes. And then defensively, if I'm running a 4-3, I don't really have like a go-to like Playbook, I mean, I usually just default with the Bengals just because I know they have a 4-3 defense and their defensive ends usually play kind of well. I think the Browns have a pretty decent playbook for simulation as well. And then if I'm running a 3-4, I would probably go with the Texans. I went the wrong way again, but I'd probably go with the Texans. I think I passed them, didn't I? Nope, I didn't. I was thinking of T, as in Texans. But yeah, I would usually go with the Texans or like the Broncos, a team with a good 3-4 defense that has like decent sack numbers every season. Like you usually see Von Miller in Defensive Player of the Year or like Jadeveon Clowney. So if you want to kind of up your sack numbers, look for teams who have, you know, the highest number of sacks and then try to replicate their playbook. That's the best tip I can really give for that. I usually will run with the Bengals though if I'm running a 4-3, which the Eagles have, so I'll do that for the rest of this little simulation here. I guess I'll talk about trades now. So obviously you can kind of go through the trade block. This is one way of getting like decent players. Like Tevin Coleman's no longer on the trade block, but all of these guys here are going to be extremely easy to trade for. This is pretty self-explanatory. I don't really have to talk about this too much. I don't think there's anyone that amazing on the trade block this year. Is Trevor Williams. Trevor Williams is on the trade block. He usually develops really well. He's not a bad player to target. Pretty easy to trade for. Brian Body Calhoun would be a decent safety. Andre Hall is a great safety to go after. He's also very easy to trade for. I'll show you a couple examples of how it's easy to trade for these guys. But before I trade for actual players, I want to talk about this first. I think draft picks are super important. If you guys have been watching my rebuilds for a while, I stockpile draft picks every season. I usually get at least like 3 or 4 for the first season of my rebuilds. And if you guys have noticed, I usually don't trade super high profile players for draft picks because you don't need to. You can get draft picks extremely easily. Like for example, Jason Peters would be a player I would for sure trade if I were rebuilding the Eagles. Just because he's 36 years old and he's going to like probably retire next year. I want to get some value out of him. But since he's a left tackle and he's an 88 overall, he has decent value. You don't need to trade him for a first rounder. But you could start off with like Wendell Smallwood. He probably has yellow interest in every team because he's a running back. For some reason, every team is somewhat interested in a running back. So that's not a bad start. You can start with him and then just, I don't know, let's see. Let's see if we can find anyone who doesn't have that much of trade value. Actually, this is probably a pretty decent idea. We can go with Chris Long. He's 33 years old, doesn't have the best trade value, but it's not bad. Left tackles have way more trade value than defensive linemen, by the way. And then you want to trade him to, let's go with the Raiders. The Raiders have a pretty bad team, and you can really, really easily get a draft pick. And just like that, I got a first-round draft pick for the Raiders. It's really not that hard. I see some people trading draft picks for first-round draft picks, like trading like a second and a player or something. You don't need to do that. You can just trade some random backups. Like, let's see. Mike Wallace is another good trade piece for a draft pick because he doesn't have a ton of value, but I could probably trade him to like the Ravens or something and get a pretty easy draft pick. Let's see who else they want. They want a tight end. Don't think I have... Actually, Richard Rodgers. This might even work. It's not going to work. They're not interested in Richard Rodgers. But the Bills are. The Bills are interested in Mike Wallace and Richard Rodgers. Get a first rounder. Probably tag on a 5th rounder to that too. And there you go. You got another first, and now you have a 5th round draft pick. And you're just trying to trade away the players who are backups, who are pretty expensive and don't really affect your team all that much, especially if they're older. That's always a great piece as well. And then like there's random positions like backup quarterback has typically a lot of value. So like Nick Foles will have a decent amount of value. Jason Peters as well. So that's pretty much like the main tip when it comes to trading. Just try to trade for a lot of draft picks. Even if you have a great team and you're not trying to tank, a lot of draft picks can still help you out in the long run. I kind of want to just show off a few players who are really easy to trade for, you know, for how good they actually are. So you guys have seen me do this a ton, but Joel Bitonio is insanely easy to trade for. Haloti Ngata almost does it just straight up. Now I'm in a pretty good position if I actually want Joel Bitonio, because Haloti Ngata can pretty much get him by himself. What I can do here is just look for veteran players, like Chris Maragos is a good one. A player who's not very good but has a decently sized cap hit. Like Chris Maragos probably won't have, or like teams won't be interested in Chris Maragos. I highly doubt it anyway. So you just kind of look through the team, see if you find anyone with like $1 million or more in a position where like they're not the best at, or like they're really low overall. You can find a few of them on some teams. Okay, so Steven Wisniewski is another one. So these guys probably won't have too much interest going around the league, but if I add them to this trade, it'll work, and now we have Joel Bitonio. Here's another player who's actually really easy to trade for how good he actually is. I'm not sure if this is going to go through. I didn't check. But Adrian Amos develops really well. He has great stats, and I think he has quick development. He's also already an 87, and he's only like 24 years old. So he's a great player to target. He is also pretty cheap. He doesn't have a cap hit right now. I think he's on a contract year or something. He either is this year or the year afterwards. That's probably why he's so easy to trade for. But let's see if this trade will go through straight up. Actually, I don't have enough cap for this. Hold on a second. Let me try to find a player just to add to the trade to take away some cap hit. Chase Daniel, I'll take him. That's very close to working. Okay, so that's super close to working. Nick Foles is very expensive, so he probably contributed a lot to that cap hit there. Let me see if I can find somebody else to trade to this team. I can't really find any other player to go along in this trade, so I'm just going to throw in a 3rd round draft pick. And that ended up working. I could have potentially went with a 4th, but still, I'm getting rid of Golden Tate, who's going to regress very, very easily. Getting rid of Michael Bennett, same thing goes with him, and a 3rd round draft pick, which isn't really all that valuable, considering I'm getting Adrian Amos, a star safety. So, like, he's not really fit. He doesn't really fit on this team because, I mean, I feel like I wouldn't trade for him if I were actually rebuilding the Eagles. But yeah, I mean, he's a very easy player to go after, and I have another one in mind who is, like, equally as easy and equally as dominant. This trade was perfect for a rebuild. So Nigel Bradham is getting up there in age, Rodney McLeod is, so is Nick Foles, and they're all pretty expensive. And it just takes 3 players here to get DeForest Buckner. He's going to develop quickly, as you can see there by the feedback thing, but he's also like 24 years old. I think he has quick development. He usually goes up to like a 95 by the end of rebuilds, and he is super easy to trade for. I'm not going to go through like everyone who I can think of right now. Those are like the first few I thought of, but players like that who are still kind of young are still kind of easy to trade for. Like George Kittle's another one of these guys. Pretty sure you can just get him with like 3 players. These players are kind of just placeholders here, because if you can imagine if I had Rodney McLeod instead of Avonte Maddox, and then if I had like Haloti Ngata instead of Timmy Jernigan, those 2 players would probably have like the same value as these guys to the Packers, and then the 1st round draft pick. That might have actually went through if I had Rodney McLeod because he's a higher overall. So just what you're trying to do, very self-explanatory, but what you're trying to do, take away all the really old players, really expensive players. If they're over an 80, that's beautiful because they still have a lot of value to some teams, and you can get some really, really good players in return. Another one of those guys, Devontae Adams. He's young, still not super expensive for how talented he is, just as close as, you know, David Bakhtiari. But then, there are some random players who are, like, impossible to trade for. I'll just show you this. I don't know why, but I'm pretty certain Tremaine Johnson is near impossible to trade for. Yes, I don't know why. So Timmy Jernigan is a very good defensive tackle. He's young, kind of expensive, but he will develop into a beast. A 1st round draft pick, super valuable, projected to go 8th overall. I think this is the Bills. For Tremaine Johnson, a regressing cornerback, and it doesn't work. I don't understand why that happens, but Tremaine Johnson's very hard to get. So you kind of just have to do a couple rebuilds just to get, you know, the feel of who's easy to trade for and who is not easy to trade for. The main tip I want you guys to get away from trading, though, is just get a lot of draft picks. They are very, very important. You can draft so many replacements for your older players. You can draft stars who go up to like 90 overalls by the end of the season, and it's really not difficult to get a lot of 1st round draft picks. You pretty much just need like 2 players that a team is somewhat interested in, or who a team is somewhat interested in, and you can pretty much get any team's 1st round draft pick really easily. The Bills made the Super Bowl. What? How did the Bills make the Super Bowl? Hold on a second. That makes absolutely no sense. I traded with them, I think. Yeah, but I didn't give them anyone that good. They didn't even play that well. I didn't count how many losses they had, but they were probably like 9-7. How did they make... I kind of want to run through their stats really fast. I'm sure you guys are kind of curious about this too, because this doesn't make any sense. How did Josh Allen play? Or Sam Bradford was their quarterback. Okay, he did pretty well. LaShawn McCoy didn't really run the ball too well. Their defense, maybe? Like, it just went off? Blocking, was this good? No, blocking was really bad. Navarro Bowman's on their team. 12 sacks from Jerry Hughes. Okay, I don't know how that team made the Super Bowl, but it happened. Alright, well anyway, let me continue with this. If you go into the news section, this was much more impactful last year. But then if you go down to draft stories, last year, if a player was mentioned here, like in a specific way, what I mean by that is, as one of the great young distant runners in the country, Gordon Holcomb was known for never wearing down, stuff like that, okay? So, if it was said at week 3, at that point it was week 2, but if it was said before week 3, that player would have had superstar. That's in past Maddens. That doesn't stand for this year, but I'm still pretty sure that positive draft stories are still something to look after. So that guy, Gordon Holcomb, will probably still be pretty good. And then also, the guy who wins the Heisman up there, Chavez, caps season with Heisman. So Derek Chavez probably is pretty good in this game. Again, last year that would have guaranteed Superstar, but this year it does not. One last thing that would have guaranteed Superstar last year is Todd McShay's tweet. It says some of Blake's catches in the All-Star game are unreal, no choice but to give him the MVP award. If a player was named All-Star game MVP in past Maddens, that means he had Superstar. But this year it doesn't, but still, it's still nice to keep track of that because those players are probably pretty good. The main thing I want to talk about with the draft are the combine grades. So obviously people know combines are very important. But like, you can clearly tell Bryant Sowell has a fantastic combine. At 7.9, he's great in everything. He's going to be a great player. But then there's times where it looks like a player has a great combine, so you're thinking maybe he's pretty good, but then he's not actually that good. Let's see, Curry Dryer. This guy's probably a decent example of this. I don't have his top 3 skills scouted, but I would bank on the fact of this guy not being fantastic. He's probably pretty good since he's supposed to go in the mid-second round. But yeah, he has a great combine, just, you know, straight up score, 7.3. But he's pretty slow. He has a really bad 3-cone and a really bad 20-yard shuttle. Those are 3 very important stats for a wide receiver, probably the 3 most important. Bench press doesn't matter all that much. Vertical jump, broad jump, this is all in Madden, by the way. That doesn't matter all that much in predicting overall. Like Jared Haggins, probably a little better just because he has a better 3-cone, better 20-yard shuttle. But I think maybe this guy, let's see. Let me try to find a player who doesn't have a great combine, but is probably better than those top guys I just saw. This guy is probably better than those top guys. So he has a great 40-yard dash, he has a good 3-cone, and a good 20-yard shuttle. I would bank on the fact of this guy being better than these dudes with a 7 up here, just because he has better scores and where it matters. This is a pretty bad offensive lineman draft, but I do just want to say that if you see an offensive lineman with above a 6.0 combine, there's a decent shot they are going to be pretty good. But you really have to pay attention to bench press. This guy's probably pretty good. Morgan Kennedy, he's 3rd in bench press. If you see him have over 30, that's normally pretty good. That's where I cut it off. If I see a player who I kind of want to select and they don't have over 30 bench press reps, I probably won't take them. Let's see about this guy. 34, he's probably pretty good as well. Gregory Thompson, 35, he's probably good. Oh, this guy. 37, he's probably the best right tackle in this class just because of his bench press reps. It's kind of easy to tell if an offensive lineman's going to be good. You honestly just have to look at bench press, and then you can look at top 3 skills, but like, if they have really good top 3 skills, or not really good, but if they have like average top 3 skills and a really bad combine in the bench press department, they're not going to be a good player. But if they have like average top 3 skills, but a great combine, then they're probably going to be a starting caliber player. I think this might be my final tip. You guys see me do this all the time, but it's ridiculously easy to trade up in the draft. So the Buccaneers have the 1st overall pick, right? Let's see if I can just get it pretty easily. So I'm going to, you know, try to get their 1st round draft pick for, let's give them my 31st draft pick. How close is this just straight up? Not very close at all. Let's see if I can mess with this a little bit and get it to go through without really giving away much. I added Corey Clement and it went through. It's really easy to trade up in the draft. It's funny though, because right now Corey Clement's my only running back because I didn't bother re-signing anyone. So like, this doesn't make too much sense for the Eagles to do if they were in this situation, but now I got the 1st round draft pick by just giving the Buccaneers the 31st draft pick and a 77 overall running back. Forget who it is, it doesn't matter who it is. He's just a 77 overall. He would probably be the backup, you know, in most rebuilds, maybe even the 3rd string, and you just moved up 30 spots. And now look at that. I have the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd draft pick. It's really easy to get a lot of draft picks and take players. Right here, I'll take this cornerback. Probably like the top player in the class. Bryant Sowell. Didn't even scout him. He's a 79 with quick. He's actually very good, right? So he would fit the team really well. And I think that's going to be the last tip I have. I can't think of anything else off the top of my head, but if you guys have any other questions that you want me to answer, you can either comment those questions, or you can, you know, check out my Twitter, follow me on Twitter, and, you know, tweet at me, DM me, all that good stuff. It's in the description if that interests you. But thank you guys very much for watching, and I'll talk to you guys soon. Bye.